Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. On today's class we'll be making an off-shoulder dress with a puffy sleeve. So here is my pattern paper. I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, and my shoulder to half length. So I'm going to show you how I got this. Since it's an off-shoulder top, I'll be minusing 4 upwards. So the -4 is not constant. You can use -5, especially for someone that has body. So from that up, I'm going to get my bust point, the bust point I'm working with, which is 8.5, the under bust, which is 11.5, and then the half length. To get your half length, you do your under bust plus 3 inches. You can as well do your under bust plus 2 inches. So the half length I'm talking about is not the waist length, is a bit higher than your waist length, 2 or 3 inches higher than your waist length. So from there, the next thing I'm going to do is to place my tape, and I'm going to mark my nipple to nipple. That's my bust span. That is 7 divided by 2. I have 3.5. So I'm going to mark it at my bust point. Marking it at my bust point, I'm going to mark it at my under bust, and then I'm going to mark it at my half length. Then I'll also take my tape and I'll extend it to the top of my pattern paper, and I'll mark that 3.5. So I'll use my ruler and I will connect, drawing a line. The next step I'm going to take after this is to insert my dart intake. So at my under bust, I'm just going to mark 1 inch and then mark 1 inch on the other side. At my half length, I'll mark 1 inch on the other side and mark 1 inch on the other side too. Then I'll take my ruler and I'm going to connect, drawing a straight line. After drawing the straight line, I'm going to take my tape, and at the upper part of my pattern, I'm going to mark 1 inch for my dart intake at the both sides also. From there, coming down to my bust point, I'm going to go up by half and I'm going to mark. So the reason why I'm marking this half is to avoid a pointy edge when I'm connecting my darts. So I'm going to draw a line connecting the 1 inch I made on top, and I'm going to connect it to my bust area and down to my under bust. So you can actually use a freehand sketch or a French curve. On the other side also, I'm going to extend that 1 inch mark to my bust point, then down to my under bust. I'll go ahead and outline it very well so that it will be very visible. So I'm going to use my marker and mark out my line. So sorry, my marker is not working. 3 of my markers are not working. I'll just continue with my pencil. So please pardon me for this particular tutorial. So let's get to the next step. Next step I'm going to take is to mark the body circumference. At the bust, I'm going to mark the bust divided by 4, then plus 2 inches allowance. That's the 1 inch we took on both sides. I'm going to mark it. Then I'm going to mark the allowance I'm working with. So you can work with 2.5 or any allowance that you're working with. At my under bust, I'm going to place my tape and I'm going to mark my under bust divided by 4. After marking that, I'm going to mark the 2 inches that I marked. That's 1 inch on both sides, making it 2 inches. And then I'm going to mark the allowance. After marking at my under bust, so the measurement I have at my under bust, I'm going to be extending it down to my half length. So I'll carefully place my tape and I'll take the measurement I have there and I'll place it down at my at my half length. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to connect the line from my under bust to my half length and then connect it back to my bust. Then I will go ahead and extend it to the top part of my pattern paper. After connecting that, the next thing you'll be considering is your neck depth or the neck style line you're going to use for the dress. So I placed my tape at that -4 and I'm going to mark 6.5 inch. So that means I took 2.5 inches for the neck depth and I connected it. After connecting it, I'm going to cut out my pattern first before drawing out my armhole. I'm done cutting out the pattern. This is what I have. The next thing we're going to do is to go ahead and draft out the armhole. Then I'll place the front part of the pattern to the other side, and I'm going to pin it with half. So I'll take a pin and I'll just pin it. After pinning it, the next thing I'm going to do is to draw out my neckline. So I'll place my tape at that point and I'll mark my nipple to nipple measurement, which is 3.5, and I'll extend it upwards. After extending it upwards, I'm going to mark 1 inch. So this 1 inch I'm marking is for attaching hand, in case you're going to be attaching a sleeve to the dress. So you can also mark 1.5 if you're someone that has body. So from there, I'm going to extend it to my chest line. So to get your chest line is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5. After doing that, I'll just draw a curve forming my armhole. Then I'll just blend out the lines very well so that it will be visible. So you're going to be extending your neckline back to the armhole area, or the 1 inch you marked. So after marking the line, I'm just going to blend it out, and then I'm going to cut out the little excess I have at that point. After cutting out the excess, I'm just going to unpin, and this is what I have for my front pattern. So the next step is to go ahead and draft the back pattern. So for my back pattern, I'll first of all mark out my zipper allowance. So I'm going to be marking 2 inches for my zipper allowance. After marking it out, I'm going to take my ruler and I'll draw connecting a straight line. I'll go ahead and outline it as my zipper allowance. After marking out my zipper allowance, I'm going to place my tape and I'll mark my vertical measurement, which is my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, and my shoulder to top length. Note, while placing your tape, you're going to put it back at that -4, just as the front pattern. So if you're -4 or -5 or whatever you're minusing from the upper part, you're just going to place your tape at that point. So after marking out my vertical measurement, I'm going to use my ruler and I'll connect, drawing a straight line. Afterwards, I'll go ahead and mark out or indicate my bust point, my under bust point, and my waist or top length point. Afterwards, I'm going to place the tape on the pattern paper and I will mark the nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is the bust span. I'll mark it from the beginning to the end. And note, I placed it from my zipper allowance. So after doing that, I'll go ahead and draw a straight line from there. So the next thing is to insert my dart. So I'm going to mark ½ inch on both sides for my dart intake. After marking it, I'll take my rule and I'm going to extend the lines, drawing my dart. Moving on to the next step, which is to insert the body circumference. So I'm going to take whatever measurement from that zipper allowance. So at my bust, I'll mark my bust divided by 4. I'll mark the sewing allowance. Going down to my under bust, I'm going to mark my under bust divided by 4, and I'm just going to mark. Then I'll mark 1 inch extra, which is half for the dart intake, and I'll mark my sewing allowance. Then going over to my top half length, I'll place my tape and I'll measure what I have at my under bust. Then I'll place my tape back at my half length and I'm going to mark the exact thing there. After marking it, I'm just going to place my my ruler, and I'm going to connect my lines. Going back to the upper part of my pattern, I'll place my tape, measure out the bust span. From that point, I'm going to place and mark 1 inch. So that 1 inch, if you're going to be attaching sleeve, you're going to be marking 1.5 for someone that has body. So from there, I'll place my tape at -4, and I'm going to mark my chest line, which is 7 inches. So to get your chest line is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inch. After marking down your chest line, you're just going to extend it back to the end of the pattern with your ruler. So from that 1 inch you marked, you're just going to extend or draw a curve from there. After drawing out my armhole, the next thing I'm going to do is to mark or draw out my back neckline. So depending on how high or low you want your back to be, but it's preferable for your back to be lower or equal to what you have at the back. So I'm just going to mark at that point, and I'm going to connect it back to my armhole point, or that 1 inch I marked. So with that, I'm done drafting the back pattern. So the next thing I'll be doing is to mark out the puff at the zipper area. So if you notice, the back is flat, so to get rid of that bulginess, I'm just going to mark ½ inch at this point. After marking the ½ inch, I'm going to extend the line back upwards. From there, I'll be getting rid of the puff at the back. Then I'll go ahead, take my scissors, and I'll cut out the pattern for the back. So here you have it, the front and the back pattern is ready. So the next pattern we are going to be cutting out is our skirt, or the down part of the gown. So to cut for the down part, you're going to place your tape first, and you're going to be minusing the upper part. How we got our upper part was our shoulder to under bust plus 3, giving us our half length. So you're going to place your tape where that half length ends. From there, you're going to mark your skirt length. After marking that, you're just going to add 2 inches for turn up allowance. After marking your turn up allowance, you're going to place your tape at the beginning of your fabric, and you're going to measure your waist length, your waist circumference, divided by 4, and then you're going to be marking your allowance. So for those that add that to the down part of your skirt, you're also going to mark your darts. So I marked ½ inch for the dart. So from there, I'm going to place my tape, and I'm going to measure 10 inches. So the reason why I marked 10 inches is because we made use of half length. Half length is 2 or 3 inches higher than your waist length. Unlike when you're drafting your normal skirt, you're just going to place it at your waist length and mark 7 or 8 inches to get your hip length. From there, you're going to place back your tape at that point you marked your hip, and you're going to mark your hip circumference divided by 4 plus your allowance. After marking that, you're just going to take your tape down to the down part of your skirt. So at that down part of your skirt, to get a fitted look at the ending, you're going to be minusing 2 inches from your hip. So whatever you have on your hip, if your hip is 40 divided by 10, you add 2.5 inches, that's 12.5. You're going to do 12.5 minus 2 inches. So I'm just going to minus 2 inches from whatever I have at my hip, and I'm going to mark it down there. After marking it down, I'll go ahead and connect the lines. Please, when join correctly to avoid having ear at the skirt part. And I'll take my chalk and I'll extend it down to the ending part of the skirt. So I'll go ahead and cut out my pattern. After cutting this, to cut for your front, you're just going to place what you have at your front, and you add 2 inches for your zipper allowance, just like we did for the front. So here we have it. I've already cut out this part. So for the back part of the skirt, all you have to do is to attach 2 inches in front, and you're just going to slit it. So with this, we are done drafting and we are going over to sew it. So I'll be dropping the sewing video very soon so that you know how I joined the dress. So with this, we have come to the end of the tutorial. Thank you for watching my channel, and don't forget to subscribe.